together and partnered to present the new Bold Series 2.0 to bring relevant content to business owners here in the market, and never more than I think today is that more relevant. We really happy to have Judith today to bring some important information to business owners in this time that we're all experiencing. It's got all different types of facets. Some businesses are actually doing well, others aren't doing at all. It's just a crazy time. And so there's a lot going on with the SBA. There's a lot going on with the different programs that are available, and just super excited to have Judith here to discuss those with us. So I appreciate you guys being here today. I hope you walk away with some good information. And we are here to help you if you need additional questions or have additional concerns. We're happy to help you as well.
All right, thank you, Sean, and thank you for this partnership. Just to remind everybody before we introduce our speaker to use the chat feature to submit questions. I'll be asking those questions to Judith at the end of her presentation. So please use that chat feature if you have any questions for her. And now to introduce our speaker, Judith Collins has been with the Small Business Development Center for over 10 years. And we've been in partnership with her for several years now. And she's been named the North Texas SBDC Network State Star several times for her high caliber counseling and her strong commitment for small business success. Judith and I have worked together for almost 3 years, and we have a great partnership, and we like to help and service the small businesses of the Garland community. So today she's going to talk about how to prepare for the second wave of funding and what other resources are available. So Judith, you're welcome to share your screen and your presentation.
Thank you, Andrea. And thank you, everybody. Like Andrea said, I've been working with the Chamber for actually more than several years. It's been maybe 8 or 9, potentially, and I've enjoyed every moment of it. And my presentation is just going to talk about the PPP funding. It's been, to say the least, sometimes controversial in the fact, in ways it was in terms of how it's been handled. And if you're in the background like I am, you realize that there's a lot of people that really care about small businesses, a lot of lenders, a lot of SBDC folks that are really working hard around the clock to ensure that the PPP funds are dispensed in such a way that's fair. So today my presentation is just going to talk about preparing for the second round. As the SBDC senior advisor, I've been getting a lot of questions from businesses that are mostly single member. So there's whether that's single member sole proprietor, single member LLCs, single member S Corp, C Corp, etc. If they're not single members, they're partnerships, sometimes with their spouses. So there's been questions there. And so today the objective is to just tackle that, those types of businesses. And I hope that I'm able to address most of the questions. With that, I'm gonna sign off a video. You're just gonna be hearing me, and I'm gonna be focusing on a series of slides for you today. So bye-bye. Okay. So be prepared, another round of PPP loans are coming to your local bank. This time we're looking at $320 billion. Last time it was 350. That was spent in a matter of a couple of weeks, even less than that. We had some challenges, both on the lender and SBA side, but we are working through our challenges. We suspect that this round will probably go faster because we've worked out some kinks, but apparently when it was, when we opened up on Monday, the system is running slow. But anyways, we hope to, at least I hope SBA gets to the bottom of that one. Okay, so I'm going on my slides. Next slide. Just to kind of reiterate what the Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP, stands for. Paycheck Protection Program. It's designed to keep businesses afloat that were impacted by the coronavirus pandemic. There is a forgivable feature with the PPP program, but only if you use proper documentation. And that's important to stress because we get a lot of excited small businesses, mostly self-employed, that are coming to me saying, hey, I heard about these loans that's forgivable. Could you tell me about it? And the truth is, they're only forgivable if you take proper documentation. And most of the time, for small businesses, that's a challenging thing to do. So I like to stress that it's only forgivable if you use proper documentation. And we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like. It's an awesome loan in that interest rate, 1%. Length of the loan, 2 years. But repayment, you've got 6 months from the time you received a loan, a minimum of 6 month grace period. But after 6 months, we understand that the interest starts to accrue. So again, when you get the loan, you have a minimum of 6 months to start repayment. Maximum is a year, so you can defer up to 1 year, but interest starts to accrue after about 6 months. And again, forgiven only if you follow the requirements and specific uses. You only have to pay employees' salaries, benefits, plus other requirements like interest on mortgage, rent, utilities, etc. And we'll get into that. That's the term and condition, just to remind you all. It's all right, so who can apply? Same thing, nonprofit seems to get forgotten in this process as well. So I'll mention some of the documentation required there. But just to reiterate, it's still all businesses, nonprofits with less than 500 employees. The self-employed, that includes 1099s. And so I'll talk a little bit about the requirements, paperwork there for 1099s. We're getting a lot of questions there as well. And you must be in operation on February 15th to qualify. So your business, if you start a business and you started it on February 15th, you're good. Anything afterwards, not so much. So there's usually 2 main paperwork. It's the PPP form, which you should go to sba.gov and just Google PPP form. You'll find it there. My next slide will have some examples what it looks like, and I'll talk about the components of the form. And then because it's single member LLC or businesses, we're mostly dealing with the Schedule C. So you have to have like a tax form that you have to fill out first to determine what is the amount of payroll that you are seeking or that you produced. And once you figure that out, then you can fill out the PPP form. In addition to Schedule C forms, we have K1 forms for the S Corps of the world, but we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So step 1 is to pay, well, no. Step 1 is to just find a tax form. And so in this case, again, if you're mostly a single member LLC, sole proprietor, S Corp, and so forth, your best bet is the Schedule C. So if you haven't filled out your 2019 tax returns yet, our recommendation is that you go ahead and you download a 2019 Schedule C form from the irs.gov website, and you then you go ahead and fill it out. I'm not saying that you file, although you can file it once you do fill it out. You're just using it as a tool to help you determine what is your income, your net income earnings. So if you're not comfortable with filling out tax forms, then we recommend you can go use your TurboTax. You can also seek out a tax filer, or you can go to the Chamber of Commerce, ask for a recommendation on a bookkeeper or a CPA. But you have to start here first. You have to understand what your earnings are and what are the earnings that you get taxed on for you to do the payroll calculation or the PPP payroll calculation. So on the 2019 Schedule C form, line 31 is your net earnings. And from that, you're going to take that net earnings, you're going to divide it by 12 to get your average monthly. And then from that, you multiply average monthly by 2.5. And that's what you put on the PPP form going forward. So let's go to the PPP form next. And so once you understand how to do the calculation, you're going to put it on your PPP form. And the PPP form, what I'm hearing about this is most of the time people forget to sign, put their signature on questions 5 and 6. Sometimes nonprofit have a difficult time filling it out, so we'll talk about that. And then I'm also hearing that some lenders are rejecting any kind of zip code. I think they will like the 9-digit zip code versus the average. I don't know if that's a rumor, but I hear from a CPA that he said either a lender or SBA was rejecting that. And there's some lenders in the room, so I hope you can at least comment on that issue. So the PPP form looks like this. It's, it takes your business name, the address, your EIN number, Social Security, and so forth. And then you get to calculate the average monthly payroll in the top box here. You put your name as owner, and then there's a series of questions at the bottom. And if you answer yes to most of those, then you can also determine whether you qualify or not. Let's see. I think that's mostly the issues that we have with the PPP form. Mostly it's the signature and the fact that we're not putting the 9-digit area code, or zip code, and also that the PPP formula is not correct. That's how it gets rejected. Mostly that. Anyways, let's keep moving. So for self-employed, apart from the PPP form now and your tax form, you're going to have maybe some additional forms documentation that you're going to have to submit. So other documentation a lender might ask for is your personal financial statement. They could also ask for your 2018-2019 tax statement or income statement, driver's license, and if you are a, again, independent contractor, there's a Form 1099 miscellaneous. You should also include any kind of invoice that tracks the clients that you've dealt with, or any kind of spend that you've had, any kind of bank statement. The bank statement is pretty good document if you have that highlighting your costs and as transactions, or any book of record. But you want to prove that you are established as self-employed. So you also want to, if you've got an LLC or if you've got your DBA, any kind of documentation like that, you also want to provide. Before you submit any of your documentations, you also want to make sure you put it in a virtual file. So I'm trying to make this as sexy as I can, but sometimes it's just hard because, it requires so much diligence about details, essentially, and understanding the form, or whether that's understanding the form or just adding extra documentation to support what's on the form. It's just can be a tedious exercise. And I'm here to walk folks through it. I'm here to answer questions. but mostly what I would recommend is that you use your CPAs and your bookkeepers and your tax preparers for this effort. Bankers tend to be busy. So required documentation for nonprofits. The PPP will state the nonprofit that's allowed. So besides 501c3, 501c19, and then we have the tribal business concerns described in Section 31B2C of the Small Business Act. For them, it's the PPP application again, and for them, the tax form is IRS 990. And again, it's like an income statement, much like the Schedule C is. It just talks about your sales minus your expenditures and figures out what your net earnings are so that you can figure out what the calculations for the PPP paycheck formula is. So anyways, apart from the IRS 990, there's the Articles of Incorporation, there's the bylaws, an operating agreement, a driver's license, and so forth. So once again, this is how to calculate the amount of loan that you qualify for, and that's what we mean by the payroll formula. So again, you find your latest information. So that would be whatever is on your Schedule C or your K1s, if you're S Corp or C Corp. So 2019 IRS form, line 31, and then you take that total amount, so 2019 total payroll cost divided by 12 months times 2.5. And so I gave an example there where if you find that you've made net earnings of 120,000, you divide that by 12, that equals 10,000, and you multiply that 2.5, and that's what you're entitled to for the loan. If salary, so apart from calculating salaries, you're also calculating benefits, compensation, time off, sick leaves, if that's even a part of your payroll cost. And that's what it means to have a payroll cost. But if you have any individual that salary is over 100,000, so it's 102, 103, 105, etc., it's capped at 100,000. And so if your salary is over 100,000, you have to just reduce it to 100,000 and submit the form to the lender. That's if it's on the Schedule C as 100,000. Now, if you compute on the Schedule C your net earnings to be 0 or less than 0, then you're not going to be eligible for the PPP loan. And that makes sense. If you didn't make any income, then essentially what that means is you just can't afford a loan at this point. So we'll just move on. There is another step. So in case you get the EIDL, so you can add your EIDL, which is your economic injury disaster loan. So if you made one, if you had one or received one, you add it or roll it over to the outstanding amount of your PPP loan. And if you have one between January 31st and April 3rd, that's what you do. That's the next step. Unless, of course, your EIDL is the advance. So some of us, when we apply through the SBA portal, if we receive the grant or the advance of 10,000, or nowadays it's the 1,000 per employee, then that amount gets subtracted from the PPP amount. All right, so forgiveness. So you have to ask for forgiveness. So step one is you fill out your PPP form. If you do it out with good due diligence, your lender reviews it, sends it into SBA to get it approved, and then SBA, if it approves it, will send the lender some confirmation number. So that's the first step. The second step is once you get the check and the check will be deposited in your account, you have 8 weeks to spend the check accordingly, meaning on the payroll or on the requirements, which is rent, utilities, and so forth. And then 45 days later, you can go to your lender and ask for forgiveness. Now, you don't literally go and say, please forgive the loan. You have to have documentation that you spend that PPP loan accordingly, according to the requirements. So what we recommend that you do is that when you get that PPP loan deposited in your account, I would create another separate account, like deposit account, separate from your checking account, separate from your savings account. Just call it the PPP account and have that check there. And any spending that you do for payroll or payroll cost, salaries, etc., you save those receipts against the account as proof that you used the PPP accordingly. 75% of that spend has to be on payroll costs, and then the other 25% is anticipated to be spent on rent, utilities, and debt service on mortgage. So in our minds, that's the only way that you can safely and securely and confidently go and ask the bank for forgiveness based on the documentation. We can't stress that enough. You've got to find a way to create an audit trail so that you can get the loan forgiven. Now, if for some reason you get caught up, and we will, as we get our monies, we've got so much other things to worry about as business owners. We're not sure whether we're going to keep the employees, for example, that we thought we would. And other things happen. Just remember too that it's still a loan that's 1%. So just keep that in mind. So for single employee businesses, limit loan forgiveness to the proportionate 8-week share of your 2019 net profit. So we hear a lot of questions about the single member employees, like how much would it be forgiven? And sometimes they don't even have, for example, rent or heavy overhead expenditures. So what we say is that there's 52 weeks in a year, and out of that 52, 8 weeks is going to be applied. So that proportion is, you can anticipate, is what you're going to be forgiven for. That's kind of how we look at that one.
Hey, Judith, really quick.
Mm-hmm.
It's been asked twice now. So according to the Department of Treasury, it says that the loans can be up to 2 months of your average monthly payroll costs from the last year, plus an additional 25% of the amount. How is that different from what you had mentioned before?
Oh, so 2.5. So are you saying that it's not 2.5? Is that what you're saying?
I just want to know if there's a difference. I think that's why they're asking.
I'm not sure what the question is, but the Department of Treasury, as far as I can tell, it's 2.5%. I'm not 2.5%, but 2.5 times, or 250%. If there's any changes, then I'm not aware of it. Okay. So for single employee businesses, well, let me go back. The maximum loan amount forgiveness is the sum of the payroll cost again and certain overhead expenses over the 8-week period following loan disbursement. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. Oh, okay. So we says by structure. So self-employed, we have a maximum base. So essentially, since you're self-employed or you're the single member, the maximum amount of income you can claim is capped at 100,000. So you just take 100,000 if that is the maximum that you make, or if that's the amount you make. You take that base, divide it by 100. You get, I believe it's 8,333, and then you multiply that by 2.5 and you get 15. So for partnerships, it's not for each partner, it's for the partnership of the business. So whatever the income is of the partnerships, that's the amount that you calculate. So S corps, the base amount. So I think that what's important about S corps and C corps is that you have to pay yourself or remember to salary yourself as a line item under expenditure. And so that counts versus the distribution. So a lot of our single members think that because they get a distribution, does that count as income? And the answer is no. It's whatever the for S corp, it's whatever the salary that you report in your payroll services that counts. And I think that's mostly the question there. Loan forgiveness, the documentation I mentioned, we want to at least track payroll documentation, any kind of expenses, which is again, the rent, utilities and so forth, and having a designated PPP business account. Loan requirement, loan forgiveness requirement. Okay, so if you're a non-foreign worker, you're excluded from being counted as an employee. Loan forgiveness will be reduced if you decrease your full-time employee headcount. So if you submitted 10 employees at your PPP calculation, and for some reason you can't hire the 10 once the loan has been dispensed, then the loan forgiveness amount is going to be reduced by the amount that you were unable to retain. Loan forgiveness will also be reduced if you decrease salary and wages by more than 25% to each and any employee. And rehiring, well, you have until June 30th, 2020 to restore your full-time employment and salary levels for any changes between February 15th and April 2020. Any questions?
I haven't seen any other questions about the forgiveness. There has been one question that I've been asked though frequently is what if you were to hire more people than the amount of full-time employees that you initially put in your application?
Okay, well, you're allowed to do that, but you're only going to get reimbursed based on the initial calculation that you put on the PPP form. So you can do that. You can, maybe you have 5 employees and things are going well and you hire 3 more. You're only going to get forgiven for those 5 headcounts. And the good news is that it doesn't have to be the same employees, just a headcount.
Okay. So yeah, that was another question that's on here is, does that mean that you can rehire for the position or do you have to rehire the employees laid off?
No, you can rehire for, it's just a headcount. The law was about headcount. It wasn't about any of specific employees that you have, which is good because again, restaurants are having a hard time rehiring the folks that they lay off because once they file unemployment tends to pay better sometimes than some restaurant gigs. So they're challenged with rehiring sometimes, and sometimes they're stressed out about that. But again, I just remind them it's a 1% loan for 2 years.
Okay. Is bonus pay or commission included in the PPP?
Yes. Anything
Okay.
else?
They're asking if I typically take distributions, should I add myself to payroll?
Payroll is W-2. So I don't think so.
Okay.
Anything else?
That's it. We had another comment made on the 2.5 times for the what the amount of loan that you would receive. I had mentioned, or somebody had brought up the fact that it could be 2 months average plus 25%.
You know,
This
I'm hearing,
individual,
go ahead.
oh, go ahead. This
Well, no,
individual is saying, oh,
go ahead.
so this individual is saying that maybe it should be 1.25 times. That way it would provide 100% plus 25.
No, all I know is that it's got to be 2.5 times your average monthly, your average payroll, monthly payroll. So they're giving you 2.5 times or 2.5 months worth of bridge loan
Okay.
for 8 weeks. That's what it boils down to. I'm not sure why folks, I'm not sure where that question's coming from. I'll be curious to understand why they're getting those kind of insight or just in general information.
Okay.
So loan forgiveness isn't automatic at all. You have to ask for it and be prepared to back up your request with documentation. The lender must make a decision about forgiveness within 60 days. In addition, payroll taxes are due on your forgiveness portion of the loan. Some tips, deferment. So 2 things. If you get your PPP check, that's wonderful. Then you can go ahead and you can do what you need to do to maintain or retain your employees. But if you don't, there's you can defer your payroll taxes until 2022. So your 2020 payroll taxes you can defer until 2022, provided you pay 50% in 2021. Sometimes that's a good break, or it's something good to remember in case you don't get your PPP loan. You can't do both though. You can't have your PPP loan and defer your payroll taxes. Self-employed individuals may also defer, again, payment of 50% of the Social Security taxes on net earnings from self-employment income imposed during the same period, March 27, 2020, and ending December 31st. So that's what I just said. It says to avoid failure of deposit penalty for these deferment of payroll taxes, you must follow the guidelines here that says payments must be made as follows: December 31st, 2021. And let's see, I can't read the rest of my slide here. And 50% by 2021. Let's see. So step 1 is to contact your accountant, CPA, or bookkeeper and tell them that you want to apply for the PPP loan. If you don't have one, you can contact us, and I gave you our website, and you can also speak with an advisor like myself about PPP, IRS forms, and so forth. Any other questions? So fintechs are also getting into the game. So we're finding that a lot of lenders tend to just work with their existing clients, and it's hard for them to really help new clients. And that makes sense given the volume or the sheer volume of loan they have to process. And so fintechs are getting into the space, and there were a few fintech companies, which are online lenders, that were approved by SBA. We know QuickBooks, Square, and PayPal were 3 of them. And like the lenders, QuickBooks, Square, and PayPal, they're only working with their existing clients. The good news, a lot of our clients tend to have QuickBooks. So when we heard QuickBooks was getting in on it, we offered that, and they're in line for, they're hopefully in line for their PPP from QuickBooks. Some warning though, the online lenders are not banks, and so they can apply interest after the program that is astronomical sometimes. So if I were getting my PPP loan through a fintech like QuickBooks, I will make sure that I pay it off within that 2-year term and call it a day. Don't try to stretch that one out. If your PPP loan is approved, your bank will notify you. We're hearing also a lot of scams. So SBA, IRS, banks, they don't call you to confirm PIN numbers, your bank account numbers, or any personal identification. So if you find someone calling you, asking you about your PPP loan or have you applied, but they need to verify your PIN number or they need to verify your bank account number, then that's suspicious. I would just hang up the phone and call the lender myself that you dealt with to verify whether that's true. But watch out for people coming at you, unsolicited questions and requests and so forth, that I'll be careful about that. And then there's questions. There's myself, there's Sergio Bento, there's Mark Christie, there's Leslie Connolly. Those are some of the advisors that are at the SBDC that can help clear up some questions. So with that, I'll take some questions now.
Yeah. So we have a couple of more questions that are coming through. So what are your thoughts on the guaranteed payments to owners in LLCs?
So guaranteed payments are not, they're not salaries or they're not income or you know, so for the most part, the LLC, the PPP is about taxes, payroll taxes, and you have to have income for that. And so there are different terminology for income on tax statements. There's income, there's net profit, there's self-employed earnings, there's salary. Those are the terminologies we're looking for to understand how much we calculate the PPP amount for. So just kind of bear that in mind. Distribution, owner's withdrawal, anything like that, they tend not to count as income in that regard.
Okay. There's another question. Is payroll forgiveness amount computed from loan documentation amount or from actual pay after receiving loan?
One more time.
Is the payroll forgiveness amount computed from the loan documentation amount or from the actual pay after receiving the loan?
Oh, it's so it's the actual pay. So essentially you have 8 weeks of using the loan amount, and that's why you have to track the receipts. So that's why it's based on what you spent on payroll, 75%, and the 25% is the rest. So that's why it's important to track those receipts against the payroll account.
Okay, someone's asking for some clarification. Is payroll taxes not included in eligible expenses for forgiveness?
So that's a good question. So so it's you can use it to pay for payroll taxes. So when you do the payroll or the PPP, it's just based on your, again, your salary and your compensation, etc. There's no rent, there's no utilities and so forth. They give you 2.5 times that amount to bridge whatever your situation is. So included in the calculation initially is the payroll tax amount that you pay into the state. So at the end, however, that amount is taken out. Like at the end, meaning when it's time for the forgiveness, that amount is taken out.
Okay. Another question. So out of the PPP, will they be required to pay tax withholdings during the time that they received it?
Sorry, one more time.
Will they be required to pay tax withholdings during the time they received the PPP loan?
No, it's their, no.
All right, we have one more question in here. So they are a nonprofit that submitted the application back on April 7th. The bank was unable to verify their monthly payroll cost. So they went ahead and submitted the 941 in the Schedule B during the initial application. But what else would a bank need for them to continue with the application? And also, is it the first come, first serve for the application or for the loan amount?
Yeah, so I'll let a lender kind of answer that. It feels like first come, first serve. It in terms of having your PPP paperwork all together and getting it processed. That's kind of what it feels like. Tell me again the first part of the question.
So they submitted their application on April 7th, but
Mm-hmm.
the bank was unable to verify their monthly payroll cost. So then when they submitted the application, they submitted a 941 and a Schedule B. What else would a bank need?
Well, you can ask the lender, but I know there's 990s. Again, a lot of people are challenged with those tax forms. I mean, I'm not sure if they're doing it by themselves to recognize what is that true earnings or self-employment earnings or salary or, you know. So the lender hopefully should be able to kind of highlight what the challenges are. I'm, in other words, I'm kind of confused as to why they're not sure what paperwork is required when that's the lender's role. They will tell you what they're looking for, whether you're nonprofit or not. So that's kind of, I know, you know what I'm saying? I don't know the full story, but I just feel like the lender should be somewhat guiding them in terms of what is the documentation they need versus them trying to guess what they should be putting forth.
Okay. So if somebody was to make a correction in their application,
Mm-hmm.
because it feels like it is first come, first serve, would their application be put at the end
Yes,
of the list? Okay.
yes, you have to have your application together. So again, some tips about on the PPP is the payroll formula tends to be off, and the payroll formula is off, then I would ask the accountant, the CPA, if you're doing it by yourself, it depends on what tax form you're using that describes the actual income that you need to calculate. You can call us and maybe we'll try to figure out what it is you need, or we can get the right accountant to kind of weigh in on it. So first challenge is the PPP amount. What is it the right amount? And once you do calculate the amount, you have to back that up with the forms that you use to get your payroll net earnings amount. So if the form is not correct, or if there's some kind of confusion, then yeah, it's gonna be a flag, and the lender is gonna maybe put it to the back of the line. And that's unfortunate, but it happens. Yeah.
Yeah. Another question. So when they're submitting the documentation for the forgiveness, who do they submit it to? Is it through the lender as well?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Another comment here. So they read in the news report that there was some funds out of the $320 billion to be set aside for minority-owned and women-owned businesses. Is
Mhm.
that true, or how can one prove if it is true, how can one prove the ethnicity or the gender to apply?
Good question. It's not true. It would just take too much time if that was the case, and some small business would have to certify that they are minority, because just because you have a Black face or Hispanic face on your business doesn't mean you are a minority-owned business. Believe it or not, you have to certify that you are. So this time around, I don't think they don't require that certification, or they didn't earmark it specifically for minorities, which is a good thing. It's just up to the lenders now to recognize that this time around it's for the mom and pops, and however that looks like, mom and pops, sole proprietor with employees, with single members. It's up to the lender now to just ensure that that gets fairly distributed, I guess. And it's hard for the lenders, by all means, because there's just a lot of volume that they have to process.
Okay, so this is one question from us from the chamber. It's when can they come to you for help? I know for the PPP loans, you have to go through a lender. And if people are applying for the EIDL loans, they apply directly to the SBA website.
Uh-huh.
But when would they come to you for help? I know you offer the free counseling services. When would be a good time for a business to come to you?
They tend to come to us, rightfully so, when they're not sure that the PPP form is filled out correctly, or they're not sure that they're using the right tax form, or they've identified the right line to do that PPP calculation, eligibility loan calculation. So they come to us to help them really refine the paperwork before they turn it in. So that's really what we've been busy with. They also come to us when their lender is not available to them. So they might be a part of the sale. It did tend to happen with larger lenders like Bank of America, Chase, and Wells. They're so small, their business doesn't generate a lot of income. And so they may be challenged with the process of identifying a banker to speak to about the process. So they come to us asking what is the best course of action. And sometimes it's getting them another lender, recommending another lender, or in some cases, and we're happy to do it with the fintechs. QuickBooks gave us access to a portal to assist their existing clients with getting in line for this second round. So we have access to that. And then we have lenders that call us to say, hey, we're taking new customers. Please go ahead and refer. And by the way, please take a moment of your time and their time to make sure that the PPP is done well. So that's usually what we're getting.
Okay, we had a couple more questions that came through. What documentation is needed for independent contractors to apply for the forgiveness?
It's the 1099, right? If you have a series of 1099 forms, you can add those up, your earnings on those 1099s, and you can translate it to a Schedule C form. But your tax on those earnings, but you can summarize them all together, scan all of them, find out what the total net earnings are, put that on the PPP form and do the formula. Or you can go ahead and summarize them, take the net earnings, put it on a Schedule C, turn that in as well. Everyone needs to pay their 2019. There's still some people that haven't filed their 2019 taxes. So what we like about just taking that Schedule C and doing it is you can do it, take it, copy it, send it to a lender, they'll accept it. And then you can also keep it and then turn it in later to the IRS, because filing your taxes has been extended to July 15th. So you have some time there.
Okay, and the last question I see on here is it true that you can apply for at more than one bank for the PPP loans?
So that's a tricky question, but the answer is yes, because you're not sure who's going to be helping you or where in line the queue is, where you are in the queue. So the trick is when you apply for it, and as soon as you get that SBA approved confirmation number, then you should call the other bank and say you're good. You can't accept both. Like if you were to use two lenders and those two lenders give you the PPP loan, you have to refuse one. If you accept both, then that's fraud. We don't want to get anyone in trouble.
Okay, well, those were all the questions that I saw in the chat. And I asked a couple of frequently asked questions that we receive through the chamber as well. I mean, we don't have any more questions. Is there any other comments, Judith, that you would like to make?
Yeah, so
concerning the
sometimes
PPP?
in the formula, so that's why I said, either use TurboTax sometimes, or I guess you can call us, but sometimes you're not always dividing by 12. So for example, if you started a business in January 2020, so you have to January 2020 and you have February. If you did make any kind of net earnings in that period, then you would divide by 2, of course. You can't divide by 12. And then if you say had net earnings or earned some profits after June 30th, 2019, then between 2019 and December is 6 months. And so in accounting, you have a choice. You can either divide by 12 the amount between June 30th and December. You can either divide that amount by 12, or you can, if you extend into the new year, 2020, January and February, you have a choice between using that amount between January and December, or dividing by the 2 months, January and February. So whichever number makes sense or is better at your advantage is the one that you use. So there are some things in accounting that we understand, but there's also things that, for example, your history of forms that you use is very important. So you can't come to us knowing that you filled out some 2018 tax returns on a Schedule C or K1 and then ask us to give you some guidance when we're not sure what you did in the past. So if you filed your taxes on a regular basis, you should just be checking in with the person that you filed the tax with, your tax preparer, or TurboTax. I mean, we use TurboTax, and if it's not complicated, you can go back and use TurboTax for 2019. And then there's some folks who do use an accountant or bookkeeper because they own many businesses. If you own a lot of businesses and you blend them, you don't have separate income statements or tracking for either business, then it's going to be difficult to parse through all of those to figure out what is the right earnings that you can calculate the PPP formula for. And again, that's when you need a tax person, not an SBDC person.
Okay. Do you know how long it's taking to get approved for the PPP loans?
Oh, well, that's a good question. Again, you have to ask, there's some lenders online, so you may want to ask them. I know, for example, that the first round, I had some clients who didn't get the first round PPP, and they're waiting on the second round, and they're in the queue for the second round. But because the second round is going so slow, they're still waiting. So honestly, I couldn't tell you what's the average wait time.
Well, I know Sean wanted to make a couple of comments from the banking side.
Go
Sean?
ahead,
Yeah,
Sean.
thank you. There was a lot of questions through there that I had some comments on, and I was muted, so my memory is not as good as it used to be. But a couple things on the 20. There was a lot of questions about the 2.5 times the monthly payroll cost and the 25%. 2.5 times your monthly payroll cost is essentially 10 weeks. So the forgiveness period is 8 weeks. So you're calculating your loan amount on a 10-week basis and your forgiveness on an 8-week basis. That's where the 25% comes from. That's why they're saying at the end you can spend 75% on payroll cost and 25% on other things such as utilities, rent, and interest on debt. That's where that 25%, but the calculation for the loan amount is strictly based on 2.5 times your monthly average payroll cost. So I hope that clears up that piece of it just a little bit. The other thing I wanted to comment on is, and this is from a banker's perspective, yes, you can apply at multiple banks. I understand why people are applying at multiple banks. I can tell you from a banker's perspective, it's extremely frustrating when especially in this second round, when it's taken us on average 45 minutes to an hour to key in an application, only to find out that the applicant has already applied at another financial institution. So there is no way to get to PPP loan offers. When we key that into the SBA, if your other bank has already keyed it in, at the very end of the process, it tells us this particular applicant has already had a PPP loan submitted. So what I would suggest, and I know this is difficult, especially with the larger financial institutions by no fault of their own, but just to very clearly communicate with your banker. If you have applied in another financial institution and they have communicated to you, I think it was said, please let the other bank know, so that they don't spend time keying in your application, taking that time away from another business owner, only to find out that you've already been approved at another financial institution. And I know why that happens. It's just, it's causing some stress, especially in this second round where we're experiencing the issues with the E-Tran. There was another question that I wanted to comment on, and I cannot remember what it was. So that's all I got.
All right, well, thank you. Judith, do you have any other comments that you would like to make? Any other resources that could be available to help with this process?
Yeah, we do have, so our regular counseling is also about thinking 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 8 months, 10 months from now, what your business model is going to look like in this new normal. And sometimes you don't have time to really sit down and really understand how these changes are going to be affecting the minutiae and the small amount of details in your business. And so we're here to kind of help you think through that, especially if you were to receive your bridge loan or the PPP loan. Apart from following the requirements, you still have to maintain a business at the end of the day. You still have to find ways to generate revenues so that you can repay your loan in case a lot of it is not forgiven, for example. So that to me is also equally important, aside from trying to apply for these disaster loans. So we're here for that. And we've got a lot of good success stories about restaurants pivoting to a new way of being, so that we could share that with those that are still trying to figure it out, as well as some other creative ideas to generate revenues. In addition to that, understanding how to reconnect or connect with your customers in ways that are not obvious. So if you can, when you get the time, should you fit the time. That's why you should call us as well.
And
I remembered my final thought. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Schedule C, line 31, this, believe it or not, so the calculation for self-employed is, and we've talked about this a lot, is based on line 31 of the Schedule C. If that line is 0 or negative, then there is no qualification for a PPP loan. The calculation is based on your net income, not your gross income. One of the things that I have seen on multiple occasions is a borrower has provided me the Schedule C showing a loss. I tell them they're not qualified, and then all of a sudden I get a Schedule C that has income. That's really not acceptable. So I just want to make it very clear, if you're going to apply, line 31 on your Schedule C has to be positive number.
Good point. Just to reemphasize that. That's a good point.
all right, so I had mentioned this before, we are recording this and we will have it available to everybody who attended today. And I will also include Judith's information on how you can contact her. So if you would like to start thinking about, those 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year ahead from now and what your business can be doing, then you have somebody that you can talk to and get some advice for your business. But this is the end of our presentation. Thank you, Judith, for giving us all of this information, and Texas Security for having this partnership and providing this information to small businesses. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Have a great day.
Great day.
You too. Bye.